Here at Leostream, we spend a lot of time talking about how do you configure the connection broker and use all of the different flexible policy and plan options that we give you for designing VDI and hosted desktop workflows. And that's great while you're building your architecture and trying to decide what's the best way to architect the solution for your particular needs. But then you get everything up and running and your process goes on. What happens then? What happens after you're in production and users start to log in? How does Leostream help you out at that point in time? Well, I've kind of borrowed the phrase day two IT operations. This is after it's in production, users are logging in. Now really it's about maintaining the solution, monitoring user access, and really optimizing what you have out there in the field. And so things you might be doing at this time, maintaining desktop health. So a user calls you up and says, hey, I can't log into my desktop. And then you have an IT admin who needs to go and reboot it. So that's one thing you might be looking at. But maybe even more importantly, or just as important, I mentioned monitoring user access. You want to be able to know who is using what, how long have they been using it? Is there any behavior that looks out of sorts that might indicate that someone's logging into things they shouldn't be? How can Leostream help you do these kind of things as well? And kind of along the line of monitoring, another real big day two operations task is tracking cloud usage. If you have any kind of public cloud component to your design, you need to be able to look and see, hey, how much am I really spending in the cloud? How long are people using these instances? What size of instances were they? So that you can estimate and look for outliers and keep your cloud costs in check. Again, on the monitoring aspect, there's also integrating with any of the third-party monitoring tools that you use in your environment. Maybe that's Splunk, maybe that's some other system based on syslog. You want to be able to send notices out to those tools so that you can monitor the environment. And then obviously what we've seen, a lot of people will take a standalone Leostream connection broker and configure it for their POC and then actually use that in production because it's very simple to do. You install Leostream, it comes with an internal database, so you configure it and you're off and running. Obviously, if you have a single connection broker, that means you have a single point of failure though. So for high availability and for scaling, you want to create what we call a cluster and actually handle high availability that way. And I can show you how that's easy to do even after you go into production. So how does Leostream help with these things? Well, mostly I'm going to show you this through the demo that I'll do here in a second, but it really does give you easy and detailed ways to monitor access and simplify some of these tasks I've been talking about. So you can see who's using what. I can easily reboot machines or release the users, and not just from one platform, but from all platforms that I've integrated with from this single pane of glass that Leostream provides. We also do provide detailed usage reports that I'll show you now, and we're doing a lot of work going through this year to add additional reports and more dashboard functionality, so you have a really great day two operations way for monitoring the systems. I mentioned syslog servers before. You can send all of these great Leostream logs over to your syslog servers so that you can send alerts via your syslog servers. We also do have ways to send email alerts directly from within Leostream for certain events, and I'll show you those here in the demo. And finally, of course, like I said, easy to scale to meet any kind of demand. And the best way to see all of this in action is to look at the broker itself. So let's stop talking to slides and switch over to my demo. So what you're looking at here is the interface for the Leostream connection broker. This is the web interface that's used by admins. It can also be used by your end users, and I'll show you both of that here in a second. But for now, I'm going to log in as the main administrator. Now, the way this interface is set up, if you haven't seen it before, it's essentially menus down the left. And then when you're going through configuring it to set up your VDI workflows, I tell people, start at the top and just work your way down. But we're going to consider this already configured and actually talk about what do you do next. Now that users are logging in, what are the interesting and useful aspects of this interface? Well, the first thing I want to look at here is the resources section. The resources section contains pages which are essentially laundry lists of everything in your system that is being managed by Leostream. So the desktops page shows you all of the desktops across all of the different platforms. The users page shows you all of the users who are logging in and gives you information about that. The clients page tells you where are they logging in from, and this is for all the different clients that they could possibly log in from. So looking at the desktops page, here you see any of these pages have different columns that you can display here. We provide a default list. If you don't like the default list, you can always come in and hit customize column, and you see all the different information the broker stores, and you can rearrange this information as is most useful for you. The fields that I see get used a lot. You have great information here showing you information about who's using the desktop. That's the assigned user. It's the user who's currently assigned to the machine, but assigned doesn't necessarily mean they're connected or logged into that machine. It just means the broker wants that user to own that machine. So then you have these other columns here, last connect time. When did the user last connect to this machine? Are they still logged into it? When did they last log in? When did they last log out? You have all this way to see who's using what and when did they log in and are they still connected? That way I can even come over and hit status to query a Leostream agent to see if they are still logged in and even forcefully log them out if they want. So just as an example, there's nobody assigned to this machine, but if I click status, I see there's actually somebody logged into it. They logged in outside of Leostream, so they didn't get assigned to it. And so this gives you a way to even see, are people using machines who might not be? And then I could come in here and potentially forcefully kick them out, which I'm not going to do. So these tables give you lots of good information for viewing what's going on in the system. And the nice thing is anytime you configure any of these columns, there's then this export list link here, which you can select, and that downloads a CSV file of the information that you're displaying here. And that makes it easy for you to bring it into, for example, Excel, so you can create charts based on the data that you see down here. So that's the first thing that I want to point out for day 2 operations. Use these lists to your advantage. Configure the information in ways that means most for what you need to monitor and look at. And then you'll spend a lot of time in these pages to control the system and monitor it. So I logged in here as the main default local administrator. What we typically see is that for people who are maintaining and monitoring Leostream going forward, they don't log in as the default main admin. What you actually do is you create targeted roles for desktop administrators or other level of administrators. And you can do that here on the roles page. So a role in Leostream, let me look at the desktop administrator role. A role in Leostream applies to users and to administrators. For end users, people connecting to desktops, there's just a handful here of options that the role provides. But if you go down, you can, through the user's role, potentially give them access to the administrator interface. Perhaps if they're only users, they only have web client. But if you have an IT admin who needs to connect to their own desktops and also administer the other users' desktops, you can give them access to both pages. When they have access to the administrator interface, all of these different options show up in the role that allow you to finely tune what users of this role have access to. So I'm essentially saying whoever gets this role, they have no access to most everything. I don't want them changing the configuration because it's now done and set in stone. But I do want them to be able to manage the desktops. And in particular, I'm going to say this user can manage the desktops in the demo Linux pool. And I can even go and I can finely tune what type of actions they can take on those desktops. So here for power control, I'm allowing the person to shut down or reboot machines. Suspend doesn't apply to these particular machines. It's in a platform that doesn't support that concept. So there's no point for me to show that option to the user. So I've turned it off. The user is also allowed to release machines, run that status on the Leostream agent that I mentioned. I don't want them to see logs, so no access to logs. They can upgrade the Leostream agent. They can view the machines, which essentially means connect to it. And I'll show you that here later in the demo. And then the edit would be, I could give them full access to the edit page, but that would allow them to maybe change the IP address in the connection broker. And I probably don't want them doing that. So I'm going to allow them to view it so they can see what that information is, but not actually change those values. Now, this particular role, I am also giving access to the demo Windows pool and also VMs that are hosted up in AWS. So these demo VMs are actually hosted in my VMware environment. So this user is maintaining both the VMware machines and the AWS machines. So roles are assigned to users. If you're talking about Active Directory users, when they log into Leostream through a particular Active Directory server, they get assigned a role and a policy. The policy indicates what pools. That's policy really applies to end users. So if I log in, for example, I'm going to log in from a web browser. So I will fall into any group. And I'll come in from a web browser. That's going to give me this desktop administrator role I just showed you. And it's also going to give me a policy. So the policy is my end user desktops, whereas the role says, yep, you are an end user, but you're also an admin. So the way that looks here, I'm logging in through the same interface, but I'm logging in as me. Those are my desktops. So I can actually come in here and go ahead and connect to a machine. So now it's kind of treating me as an end user. Oops, let me just finish that. But you notice here on this UI, whoops, let me finish that login. Typoed that password, but we'll let that fail in the background. There's this other link here for Open Administrator View. Because my role allows me, if it didn't, that wouldn't be there, but because my role allows me, I can click on that, and now I'm in the administrator interface, but only with the permissions that my role provided. So it showed me the message board. In the resources, I see only the desktops. And now this looks similar, but different from the desktops page I showed you before. You notice there's no log link here. I see different information because every user who has access to this page can tailor which columns are important to them. So I can come in here and customize this if I want. Now, some of the cool things I can do in here, this control option allows me to do the power control. You notice there's no suspend in here. And I can select multiple options in here and power control them all at once. And that works across platforms. So I have ability to manage VMware and AWS instances, which you'll see there's the different centers that I have access to. And I can quickly, through one command, actually reboot everything if I need to. Wrong thing. The other thing I wanted to show you is this view option here. So let me sort this so I can find that machine I did status on earlier. So this Windows 10 machine, anytime there's a view link here, I click view, and you see it gives me a way to launch the desktop viewers that are supported by your connection broker, which is determined by your license key. The way that these protocols get launched is determined by the default protocol plan that's set up in your broker. And I know my default, actually, just for simplicity for this, I'm going to launch an RDP connection. So I can click there, and that's going to connect me into that machine. So now I can log in here. There it goes. Now, what are you looking at here? Here's, you notice I actually installed on this machine a Kiwi syslog server, because what I want you to be able to see is how connection broker logs are being sent over to a syslog server. So let's show you how that happens. Let me minimize that. So here, let's go back to the tab that is for the main connection broker administrator, or for any user who has access to all the pages. In the system setting here, there's a log page, and the log page is just tallying everything that's going on in the system. You can see the login that I just did. When I switch to the administrator view, you get all of that information here. And you can send that to a syslog server if you want. And this can be anything. You know, I'm using that open source Kiwi syslog server, but any system that accepts syslog logs you can use. So you just enable that and enter the IP address or host name here. The information that's going there, the level is determined by what you check here, which is also what you'll see on the log page. So by doing that, that is then relaying the log messages over to the syslog server here. So you can actually see everything here, and then your syslog server can send out emails or notifications, however you have it set up. So that's a nice way to integrate with external logging systems. Okay. The other thing that you can do when you want to talk about notifications is send emails, I mentioned, for certain events. So to do that, here in the setup section, The first thing you need to do is indicate which email, what SMTP server do you want to use to send these emails. If you don't want to integrate with an external SMTP server, the connection broker does include a built-in one, which is what I'm using here. So you just say, yep, I'm using the built-in SMTP server, and then indicate what address the message is being sent from. The way that you then indicate what kind of email alerts are actually going to be sent is done here in the system section. The system alerts, this is the current set of alerts that we have integrated into the broker. If you don't see one here and there's something you would like us to send, we're always willing to hear what you have to say. But right now, the way I have this set up is it's going to send an email if a user's not offered a desktop from one of their pools. It's going to tell me if a center goes offline or if a gateway goes offline. So this is very important. If a center or a gateway goes offline, my system may become operational if a user needs to connect to something in that center or through that gateway. So it's very important for the IT staff to be alerted to when this happens. So here you can automate that. So to see what that looks like, let me go to my policy here. In my policy, which I happen to know I was offered this machine here, you notice I have an option here, inform the user when the pool is out of resources. Well, when I logged in, I had resources on all my pools. Let's change that. Let's say, make this one unavailable. So I can do that through the resources desktops page by looking, actually, the best way to find that particular machine is to go to pools. And then it was this guy here, my Linux Remote Boost pool. So by clicking on the link for that pool, my desktops page is automatically filtered, so it's easy for me to find that machine. And now I'm going to go ahead and edit that, and I'm going to make it unavailable. And I needed to do this as the main broker admin, not my user who had admin rights, because my admin rights didn't allow me to do the editing. So now this machine is not available. So if I sign out and sign back in here, oops. Now you see, I see a notice that the machine is not available. That actually, that same notice here, no resources available, shows up in the syslog messages. So if you were getting notifications from syslog, you would see, oops, that user didn't get a machine from a pool. That might be your indication that you don't have enough resources in the pool, or there's something wrong with the resources in those pools, so they're not being offered. And now you know to go and look into that problem. You notice then here too, if I refresh my list, I should have gotten an email. Oops, and then I clicked the tab. But I would have gotten an email to my email as well. And I can show you that later here. I'm not going to try and open up the tab again. So that's the email alerts. So what are some other reporting things that you can do? The most widely used report that I've seen is the user assignment report. So this is essentially gathering information out of the log table to indicate who's using what, when did they start being assigned to that machine. If the end date is empty, they're still assigned. Yep, see here, they're still assigned, but they're not connected. This could be a hard assigned machine that's been assigned for the entire time. But this gives you a great way for looking at the duration. So if these are cloud machines, now you know, okay, a user was using it for these number of hours. So if I need to bill a particular client for those hours, now I know how long to bill them for, as an example. Another great report, and I should say this also exports, just like the log tables can be exported. You can export this to a CSV file. Makes it very easy to import into Excel, for example. Another great report that we have is the pool history. And I won't call it a report yet, I'll just call it pool history data. It will soon be a report. But right now, anytime you have a pool, you can actually turn on tracking for that pool. So it'll track assignments and conditions and essentially tracks the information for the pool of the pool size information. So number of machines in the pool, how many are available, how many are in use, how many are running, at a sample rate that you define here. Now, right now, there's no way in the broker to generate a report from that automatically. We are adding that, but you can always ferret this information out of the database. The Connection Broker database is published. If you go to the System XML API page, you can click this little link, and that opens up the database schema, the pool history table here is the table that contains the pool history. And so here's where you'll be getting the information for the pools that you've turned this on for. So you can grab that information out, again, bring it into Excel, whatever's your favorite charting application, and create graphs using that. So as you might notice, there are a lot of different ways that you can leverage Leostream to help you with day two operations, monitor, maintain, scaling. When it comes to scaling, again, it's very easy. Once you have your broker set up, it's on an internal database. You can switch it to an external database. That will cause you a little bit of downtime because when the switch occurs, the broker copies the contents of your internal database to your external database, and then it needs to reboot. But that is the extent of your downtime. Then as you add new connection brokers to your cluster, you simply attach them to that external database, and now all the brokers in that cluster act as a unit, and you have no downtime. Everything's just chugging along as usual. So if you want to try this out, we do offer a free trial. You can always feel free to contact us with feature requests or for trial requests at sales@leostream.com. Thanks.